Think about any news headline about the economy, inflation,
Yeah.
a new product, companies struggling, others doing great. Behind it all are these really fundamental questions.
Absolutely. Like what actually gets made?
Right. And how does it get made? And crucially, who ends up getting the stuff?
Hmm.
These aren't just like dry textbook topics. They're really shaping our world constantly.
You really are.
So today we're diving into Module 1 of Industrial Economics and Foreign Trade. We want to give you, the learner, a real feel for these core ideas.
And we've got some good material to work with.
Yeah, we've got the IEFT Module 1 PDF notes, the Module 1 PPT notes, both from Carolyn Notes, and also a list of important essay questions for this module.
So the plan is to really unpack these foundational concepts.
Exactly. Our mission today is to get to the heart of economics, especially that interplay between demand and supply. Okay, let's jump in.
That's good. So economics. Fundamentally, it's about how society deals with having limited resources, stuff to satisfy what feels like endless wants.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? The word itself, economics, comes from the Greek iokonomia.
Right, household management. It's about making choices with what you have.
And you really can't talk about modern economics without mentioning Adam Smith.
No, definitely not. The father of economics. His book, Wealth of Nations, back in 1776, it really set the stage.
Still relevant. And that tension you mentioned, limited resources, unlimited wants, that's the core issue, yeah.
It is. That's scarcity. It's
Yeah.
just the basic truth. There isn't enough to go around for everyone to have everything they desire.
And because of that scarcity,
We have to choose. Making one thing means not making something else with those same resources.
Lionel Robbins put it well, didn't he? Back in 32.
He did. He defined economics as the science studying human behavior. How we relate our ends, our goals, to scarce means that have alternative uses.
That alternative uses part is key.
Absolutely. Like land, you can farm it, build on it, make it a park. Choosing one means giving up the others. That's the opportunity cost.
Okay, so scarcity forces choices. Got it. And these choices lead to those fundamental economic problems every society faces. Samuelson's Big Three.
What, how, and for whom? Exactly. These are the central problems of allocating resources.
Let's break those down based on our sources. First, what to produce and how much.
Right. Since we can't make everything, we have to decide which goods and services are most important and in what amounts.
Like the example in the notes, more cloth means less food, potentially.
Precisely. And that decision involves looking at, what resources we have, the technology available, the costs, and of course, what people actually want, demand.
The big balancing act. Then there's the how question. How do we actually make this stuff?
Yeah, how to produce. This is all about efficiency. How do we make the chosen things in the best way?
Using more people or more machines.
That's the classic trade-off. Labor-intensive versus capital-intensive. The goal is usually to maximize output or, minimize the cost for a certain level of production. Good technology is really key here.
Make it smart, not just make it. Okay, and the third question. For whom to produce?
This one's about distribution. Who gets to enjoy the goods and services we produce? The notes mention ensuring everyone gets at least a minimum level.
And beyond those three core questions.
Our sources also highlight the need for full utilization of resources, no idle factories, no unemployed people if possible, aiming for overall economic efficiency.
And growth.
And economic growth, yes. Increasing our capacity to produce over time, maybe through new resources or, more often, better technology.
These are huge challenges. Now, to help visualize these limits and choices, we have the production possibility curve, the PPC.
Ah, yes, the PPC, or PPF, Production Possibility Frontier. It's a really useful graphical tool.
So what does it actually show?
It shows all the different combinations of, say, two goods that an economy can possibly produce if it's using all its resources efficiently with the current technology. It basically draws the boundary of what's achievable.
At any point right on that curve.
Represents an efficient production choice. The specific point chosen depends on society's preferences.
What about points inside the curve? Or outside?
Good question. A point inside means you're being inefficient. You could produce more of both goods without sacrificing anything. Maybe resources are idle or used poorly.
So underutilization.
Exactly. And a point outside the curve that's currently unattainable with the resources and technology you have right now.
So the goal is to be on the curve.
Generally, yes. Maximizing potential.
The notes also mention a production possibility schedule. Is that just the table version?
That's right. It's the table listing the combinations of the two goods. The PPC is just that table plotted on a graph.
Okay. And the shape of the PPC matters, right? It slopes
Yeah.
downwards and it's usually bowed outwards.
Correct. It slopes downward because of scarcity. To get more of one good, you must give up some of the other, assuming you're already using resources fully.
That makes sense. And the outward bow, that concave shape.
That reflects something called increasing marginal opportunity cost, or increasing marginal rate of transformation.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Increasing marginal opportunity cost. What does that mean in plain English?
It means that as you produce more and more of one good, the amount of the other good you have to give up for each additional unit gets larger and larger.
Why is that?
Because resources aren't equally good at producing everything. Some land is great for wheat, not so good for cars. To make more cars, eventually you have to shift resources that were really productive in making wheat. So you lose more wheat for each extra car you gain. The sacrifice increases.
Oh, okay. The more you specialize, the costlier it gets at the margin. Makes sense. Can this curve move? Can our possibilities change?
Oh, absolutely. The PPC can shift. A shift outwards to the right means economic growth.
How does that happen?
Finding new resources, or more commonly, technological advancements that let us produce more with the same resources.
And it can shift inwards, too.
Unfortunately, yes. A leftward shift means economic contraction. Think natural disasters destroying factories or farmland, war, or maybe technology becoming obsolete.
So it's a snapshot, but a snapshot that can change. Okay, let's zoom in now from the whole economy to the firms operating within it. What are their main objectives, according to the sources?
Well, the traditional assumption is profit maximization, making as much profit as possible.
Seems logical for a business.
It is, but the notes point out it's not always the only goal or even the main one. Firms might focus on maximizing sales revenue instead.
Why would they do that, even if profits per item are lower?
Couple of reasons. Maybe they want to gain market share, build up market power for the long run. Maybe managers like running bigger companies, prestige, higher salaries.
Would drive out competitors.
That too. It can be a strategic move to dominate the market later, potentially leading to mergers or takeovers. So sacrificing short-term profit for long-term gain.
And the notes mention long-run profit maximization specifically.
Right. That's about making decisions today, like investing heavily in R&D. That might hurt profits now, but are expected to yield much bigger profits down the line. Building a strong brand is another example.
Investing for the future. It's interesting that social and environmental concerns are listed too.
Increasingly so. Firms realize customers care about this stuff. Good ethics, being environmentally responsible. It can be good for the brand, attract customers, even employees. It's not just philanthropy anymore. It can be strategic.
And then there are cooperatives. They operate differently, right?
Yeah, co-ops are usually set up to maximize the welfare of their members who might be workers, consumers, or producers. Profit isn't the main driver in the same way. It's often shared among members.
So different structures, different goals. Let's touch on those structures. What are the main types of firms our sources cover?
They outline four main ones: sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, and LLC, the limited liability company.
Okay, sole proprietorship first. Sounds simple.
It is. One owner, they run it, get all the profits.
But also all the risk.
Exactly. That's the catch. Unlimited liability. If the business goes bust, the owner's personal assets, house, car, could be at risk to pay off debts.
Ouch. But easy to set up, total control.
Right. Advantages are simplicity, control, getting all the profits, less regulation. Disadvantages are that huge liability, difficulty raising money, and the business dies with the owner, essentially.
Okay. What about partnerships?
Two or more owners sharing the load, the investment, and usually the liability. It can be formal or informal.
Advantages.
More resources, shared expertise, still relatively easy to set up.
Disadvantages. Still that liability issue.
Yes. In a general partnership, each partner can be on the hook for all the business debts, even if another partner caused them. Selling your share is tricky, and if one partner leaves, the partnership often ends. Limited partnerships can structure liability differently, though.
So sharing the work, but also potentially sharing deep trouble. Then corporations, they sound more formal.
They are. A corporation is a separate legal entity from its owners, the shareholders, meaning the corporation itself is responsible for its debts. The owners generally have limited liability. Their personal assets are protected. That's a huge plus.
Definitely. Easier to raise money, too, I suppose. Selling shares.
Yes, and ownership is easily transferable. They can last longer than the original owners.
Downsides. Must be some.
Oh yeah. More complex and costly to set up and run, more regulations, and the big one, potential double taxation. The corporation pays taxes on its profits, and then shareholders pay taxes again on any dividends they receive.
Right, taxed twice. Okay, lastly, LLCs, limited liability companies. The notes just mentioned them briefly. What's the gist?
They try to blend the benefits. You get the limited liability protection like a
Oh,
corporation.
that's good.
But often, the profits and losses can be passed through directly to the owner's personal income, like a partnership or sole proprietorship, avoiding that double taxation at the company level. Kind of a hybrid structure.
Right.
Rules vary, though.
Okay, that gives us a good map of how businesses can be organized. Let's shift focus now to the consumer side. The law of diminishing marginal utility. Sounds important.
It's fundamental to understanding consumer behavior. Professor Alfred Marshall is closely linked with developing this.
It revolves around utility, right? What is utility exactly?
Utility is basically the satisfaction or usefulness a person gets from consuming something. It's subjective, different for everyone, different depending on time and place.
Can you measure? I think I saw something about utils.
Historically, some economists tried to measure it with units called utils. Nowadays, it's more common to think about ranking preferences. I prefer this over that, rather than assigning specific numerical values, but the core concept remains.
Okay, so utility is satisfaction. What about marginal utility?
Marginal means the additional or extra utility you get from consuming one more unit of something.
So not the total satisfaction, but the change from adding one more.
Exactly. Total utility, TU, is the overall satisfaction from, say, 3 cookies. Marginal utility, MU, is the extra satisfaction you got specifically from that third cookie compared to having only 2.
And the diminishing part.
The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as you consume more and more units of the same good, the extra satisfaction, the marginal utility you get from each additional unit tends to decrease.
That feels intuitive. Like the first slice of pizza is amazing.
The second is good.
The fifth,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Might even make you feel worse.
Precisely. Now, there are some assumptions for this law to hold cleanly.
Right. The notes mention those. What are they?
Things like the consumer is rational, the units consumed are identical, there's no big time gap between consuming them, tastes don't suddenly change, and the price is constant. If the pizza slices kept getting better, the law might not apply in the same way.
Okay, so all else being equal, more isn't always proportionally better in terms of added satisfaction.
Yeah.
How do total utility and marginal utility relate as you consume more?
Typically, total utility increases initially, but at a decreasing rate. Why? Because marginal utility is falling.
Right, each extra unit adds less satisfaction.
Eventually, total utility reaches a maximum, that's the saturation point. At that exact point, the marginal utility of the next unit is 0. It adds no extra satisfaction.
And if you keep going.
Then marginal utility becomes negative, we call it disutility, and your total utility actually starts to fall. Think of feeling sick from eating too much.
The notes mention 3 stages of returns based on this.
Yeah, briefly. Stage 1, maybe increasing returns where MU might rise initially. Stage 2, the main one, diminishing returns, where MU falls but is positive and TU rises slower. Stage 3, negative returns, where MU is negative and TU falls. A rational person tries to stay in stage 2.
Okay, and this whole idea helps explain consumer equilibrium, how we decide what to buy.
Exactly. Equilibrium is where a consumer maximizes their total satisfaction given their budget and the prices. For a single good, say X, you'd keep buying it as long as the marginal utility, MUX, is greater than or equal to its price.
So you stop when the satisfaction from the last unit is just worth the price.
Pretty much. Equilibrium is where MUX equals P.
And if you're choosing between, say, coffee and tea.
Then you try to equalize the marginal utility per dollar spent on each. So the MU of coffee divided by its price should equal the MU of tea divided by its price. MUX/PX equals MUY pi. That's the law of equal marginal utility, getting the most satisfaction bang for your buck across different goods.
Right, balancing the satisfaction per dollar.
Yeah.
Okay, this understanding of utility sets us up nicely for demand. What's the economic definition here?
Demand isn't just wanting something. It's the desire for a good backed by the ability and the willingness to pay for it.
So I might desire a yacht, but I don't demand one unless I have the money and I'm actually ready to buy it.
Exactly. And quantity demanded is a specific amount someone is willing and able to buy at a particular price during a certain time.
Makes sense. What factors influence this quantity demanded for an individual? Price seems obvious.
Price is usually the biggest one. Generally, it's an inverse relationship. Higher price, lower quantity demanded. Lower price, higher quantity demanded. That's the law of demand.
But there are exceptions. Giffen goods, Veblen goods.
Yeah, interesting outliers. Giffen goods are rare, inferior goods, where a price rise makes people buy more because they can't afford anything else. Veblen goods are status symbols. The high price itself drives demand. Think luxury watches.
Fascinating. What else affects demand besides price?
Income is huge. For normal goods, more income means more demand. For inferior goods, like maybe cheap ramen, more income might mean less demand as people switch to better options.
Okay, income matters. What about other products?
Prices of related goods, substitutes, like Coke and Pepsi, if Coke's price goes up, demand for Pepsi might rise. Complements, like printers and ink cartridges, if printer prices fall, demand for ink might rise because people buy more printers.
Right, substitutes and complements. What else?
Tastes and preferences, just when people like. Fashion, advertising, health trends can all shift this.
Future expectations.
Yep. If you think the price of gas will jump next week, you might fill your tank today, increasing current demand.
And the number of buyers.
Absolutely. More people in the market generally means more overall demand.
So it's a complex mix. This is all captured in the demand function, right? DX, OPIL, FPX, PZ, Y, TE, NYD.
Exactly. That's the mathematical way of saying quantity demanded, DX, depends on its own price, PX, related goods prices, PZ, income, Y, tastes, T, expectations, E, number of buyers, N, and even income distribution, YD.
And boiling that down, we get the law of demand. State it one more time.
Holding all else constant, ceteris paribus, as the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases, and as the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. Inverse relationship.
And we can show this in a table, the demand schedule.
Right. Just a list of prices and the corresponding quantities demanded.
And graphically is the demand curve.
Which typically slopes downwards, visually showing that inverse price-quantity relationship.
Okay, but crucially, that curve assumes only the price is changing. What happens if one of those other factors changes, like income or tastes?
Ah, that's a different thing. That causes a shift of the entire demand curve. It's vital to distinguish this change in demand, a shift from a change in quantity demanded, a movement along the curve.
So if the price of apples falls, we move down along the existing demand curve for apples, quantity demanded increases.
Correct.
But if a study says apples prevent aging, suddenly everyone wants more apples at every price.
Exactly. That's a shift of the entire curve to the right, an increase in demand, caused by something other than the apple's price changing.
And a shift left would be a decrease in demand, like if incomes fall for a normal good.
Precisely. Or if the price of a substitute falls, or tastes change unfavorably, less demand at every given price.
Got it. Movement along versus shift of the curve. Now, how much does quantity demanded change when price changes?
That's elasticity.
Right.
Yes, elasticity of demand. Alfred Marshall's concept again. It measures the responsiveness or sensitivity of quantity demanded to a change in price, or income, or the price of another good.
Let's focus on price elasticity. How responsive is demand to changes in its own price?
Right. We categorize this responsiveness. There's perfectly elastic demand.
Meaning?
Infinite responsiveness. A tiny price change causes demand to drop to zero or become infinite. It's theoretical, a horizontal line.
Okay, then perfectly inelastic.
Zero responsiveness. Quantity demanded doesn't change at all no matter the price. Think life-saving medicine with no substitutes, a vertical line.
Then the ones in between?
Unit elastic. Percentage change in quantity equals the percentage change in price. Elasticity equals 1. Elastic. Demand is very responsive. Percentage change in quantity is greater than percentage change in price. Elasticity 1. Think luxuries. Inelastic. Demand isn't very responsive. Percentage change in quantity is less than percentage change in price. Elasticity 1. Think necessities like basic food or fuel.
So, if demand is elastic, dropping the price could really boost sales volume. If it's inelastic, raising the price might not hurt sales volume much. How do we calculate this? The percentage method.
That's the standard way. Price elasticity, ED, equals the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price.
The notes had examples like if price falls 10% and quantity rises 5%.
Then elasticity is 5%, 10% equals 0.5. That's inelastic demand. The quantity change is proportionally smaller than the price change. If quantity had risen 20%, elasticity would be 20%, 10% equals 2, which is elastic.
Okay, that calculation makes it clear.
Yeah.
Right, we've covered the demand side thoroughly. Let's switch to the sellers. Let's talk about supply.
Okay. Supply refers to the quantity of a good or service that producers are willing and able to offer for sale at different prices during a specific period.
Willing and able. So it's not just what they can produce, but what they choose to sell at a given price.
Exactly.
What factors drive these supply decisions? Price again?
Price of the good itself is usually key. Generally, a direct relationship here, higher price, more quantity supplied, it's more profitable to produce and sell. Lower price, less quantity supplied. That's the law of supply.
Okay, what else influences supply? Prices of related goods.
Yes, particularly substitutes in production. If a farmer can grow wheat or corn, and the price of corn shoots up, they might switch land away from wheat, reducing the supply of wheat.
Makes sense. What about technology?
Big factor. Better technology usually lowers production costs, making producers willing to supply more at any given price. It shifts the supply curve out.
And costs of inputs, labor, materials.
Crucial. If input prices rise, production costs go up, profits get squeezed, and supply tends to decrease. Shifts the curve inwards.
Government policies, taxes, subsidies.
Definitely. Taxes, like excise taxes, add to costs and reduce supply. Subsidies do the opposite. They lower costs and tend to increase supply.
So it's a calculation based on prices, costs, tech, and rules. And there's a supply function for this too. SX, FPX, PZ, TC, GP.
Correct. Quantity supplied, SX, depends on its own price, PX, related goods prices, PZ, technology, T, input costs, C, and government policy, GP.
And the simple version is the law of supply.
Ceteris paribus, all else equal as price rises, quantity supplied rises. As price falls, quantity supplied falls. Direct relationship.
Shown in a supply schedule table.
And graphically by the upward sloping supply curve.
And just like demand, we have movement along the curve versus a shift.
Exactly the same distinction. A change in the goods' own price causes a movement along the curve. Change in quantity supplied. A change in technology, input costs, related prices, or policy causes a shift of the entire curve. Change in supply.
So a new, cheaper way to make solar panels shifts the supply curve for solar panels to the right, more supplied at every price.
Perfect example. That's an increase in supply.
And like demand, supply has elasticity too, responsiveness to price.
Yes, elasticity of supply, yes. Measures how much quantity supplied responds to a change in the goods' own price.
Same categories as demand elasticity, perfectly elastic, inelastic, etc.
Analogous, yes. Perfectly elastic, ES is horizontal. Perfectly inelastic, ES in a row, is vertical quantity fixed regardless of price. Unit elastic, ES1, inelastic, ES1, it reflects how easily producers can adjust their output level when the price changes.
Okay, so we have demand, we have supply, now let's bring them together. Market equilibrium.
Equilibrium is the point of balance. It's where the quantity consumers want to buy, quantity demanded, exactly equals the quantity producers want to sell, quantity supplied.
No pressure for change at that point.
Right. The market is cleared. This happens at the equilibrium price.
The price where the demand and supply curves intersect.
Exactly. At that price, the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. That quantity is the equilibrium quantity.
What if the market price isn't at equilibrium? Say it's too low.
If the price is below equilibrium, quantity demanded will be higher than quantity supplied. You get a shortage or excess demand. Buyers will compete, pushing the price up towards equilibrium.
And if the price is too high?
Above equilibrium, then quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded. You get a surplus or excess supply. Sellers will have unsold goods and will likely lower prices to sell them, pushing the price down towards equilibrium.
So the market tends to self-correct towards this equilibrium. The notes had a table showing this clearly.
Yes, showing the price, quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and whether there's a surplus or shortage at each price, identifying the equilibrium where demanded equals supplied.
And what happens if the underlying demand or supply curves shift? How does that affect the equilibrium?
Good question. If demand increases, shifts right, with supply constant, both equilibrium price and quantity will rise.
Because there's a shortage at the old price.
Exactly. If demand decreases, shifts left. Both price and quantity fall.
What if supply changes? Supply increases, shifts right, demand constant.
Then you get a surplus at the old price. So equilibrium price falls, but equilibrium quantity rises. More stuff is sold, but cheaper.
And if supply decreases, shifts left.
Shortage at the old price, equilibrium price rises, and equilibrium quantity falls. Less stuff sold, but at a higher price.
So shifts in either curve ripple through to change the market outcome. Okay, two more concepts tied to this. Consumer surplus and producer surplus, what are they?
They measure the extra benefit or welfare participants get from the market. Consumer surplus is the difference between what consumers are willing to pay for a good and the market price they actually pay.
Like getting a bargain.
Kind of, yeah. It's the value you receive above the price you paid. Producer surplus is the difference between the market price producers receive and the minimum price they were willing to accept to supply the good.
So the extra profit margin above their minimum acceptable price.
Essentially, yes, it's the benefit to the producer. Graphically, consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the equilibrium price. Producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the equilibrium price.
And at equilibrium, these surpluses are maximized, indicating efficiency.
Generally, yes. Free market equilibrium tends to maximize the sum of consumer and producer surplus, representing an efficient outcome.
But what happens when the government steps in with, say, taxation?
Well, taxes are necessary, but they do affect the market. A tax on a good usually drives a wedge between the price buyers pay and the price sellers receive. Buyers pay more, sellers receive less.
And that affects the quantity traded.
Yes. The quantity bought and sold typically falls compared to the no-tax equilibrium. Because the price for buyers is higher and the net price for sellers is lower, fewer transactions are worthwhile for both sides.
And this reduction in transactions leads to
Deadweight loss. This is the loss of consumer and producer surplus that isn't transferred to anyone else, like the government as tax revenue. It represents transactions that would have happened without the tax, creating mutual benefit, but now don't. It's a loss of overall economic efficiency.
the sandwich shop example in the notes illustrated this tax raises the price, fewer sandwiches sold, potential value lost.
Exactly. The tax prevents some mutually beneficial trades from occurring, creating an inefficiency, the deadweight loss. It's a cost to society from the market distortion.
Okay, so taxes generate revenue, but can also shrink the overall economic pie a bit. Looking back, that list of important essay questions seems to cover exactly what we've discussed.
It does. Production possibility curve, diminishing marginal utility, demand and its components, supply and its determinants, consumer and producer surplus, taxation and deadweight loss. Those are the core building blocks for Module 1.
Definitely feels like we've hit the key points.
Understanding these is crucial for anything that comes next in economics.
Absolutely. So, the learner, wrapping up our deep dive today, we've journeyed from the fundamental reality of scarcity and choice,
Through visualizing limits with the PPC,
explored why firms exist and how they're structured, dug into consumer psychology with utility,
and spent a lot of time on the forces of demand and supply, how they respond to changes via elasticity.
and how they meet at market equilibrium, creating value measured by consumer and producer surplus, which can be affected by things like taxes.
It really shows how interconnected these basic ideas are.
It does. And the provocative thought to leave you with is, how do you see these principles playing out right now? In the news, in industries you follow, even in your own choices. Where do you see scarcity biting or demand shifting, or firms making strategic choices based on these fundamentals?
Yeah, thinking about how these abstract concepts connect to the real world is key.
It really is. This exploration gives us a solid foundation as we move into more complex economic territory in future deep dives.